Hi guys.
Up?
Scuba Steve here.
Grace. If you haven't met us, come give us some high fives in between service, or just whenever it's not going to be a distraction.
Yes.
How about that? Sound good? Okay, great. So we are in our brand new series called The Fall of Man. And basically that's where we're going to be learning about sin entering the world, like what is sin, covering all those things, okay? So we're in week 1, and which is titled How Sin Entered the World. Okay, cool. Now, our memory verse for this series is Romans 3:23. Y'all should all already know it because we just did it in our memory verse challenge, and I'm assuming the girls probably won.
No.
Yeah.
Guys, guys, right?
No,
No?
girls
Come on,
definitely
help me
won.
out, guys, right?
No, the girl. Okay, anyways, so y'all should all know it. So let's say it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
Awesome. All right, so in this series, How Sin Entered the World, we're going to, first off, we have to figure out what is sin, how it entered the world, and lastly, how sin separates us from God. Okay? So our main point for this series, for this lesson today is how our choices make or break us. Okay? And you may know that saying, you may have heard it before, but in case you don't, we're going to talk about it in our second point. Okay?
Point number 2.
Point number 2. There you go. So point number 1 is, what is sin? We have to first establish that. What is sin? And sin is basically missing the mark of perfection established by God. Yeah, okay. So God has this standard of, he's perfect, okay? So imagine this is God. And because of sin, because of, we disobey God, we have sin in our lives, we can never meet that standard. Here, you do it.
We never meet that standard.
Yeah,
We're always somewhere down here.
Yeah, because of sin. All right, cool. Does that make sense? Little picture? Cool. All right. Our second point is,
how did sin enter the world?
Yep.
And so, in our last years, we were talking about creation, and at the end, we talked about how God created this man and this woman named Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. And he also created this tree called the tree of knowledge and good and evil.
Yes, he did.
And so he placed them and that tree in a garden, and we pick up in Genesis 3:1-7. And so basically what happens here is Adam and Eve are going around minding their own business, tending to the garden and doing what God told them to do, and then there's this serpent. Mm-hmm. Serpent being the devil. And he goes around, he finds Eve one day, and he's like, hey, look at that tree. God said that you can't eat any of the trees, fruit from the trees. He's like, no, we can eat all of them except for this one tree. And he's like, oh yeah, well the reason he does that is because he knows that when you eat it, you're going to become really, really smart.
Really smart. And
then you'll be like God. And she's like, oh, really? Mm-hmm. He's like, oh yeah, you should eat it. And so she said, oh, that tree actually looks pretty good. The fruit looks really, really good. And so I'm going to go ahead and taste it.
Yep.
So she took a bite, and then she's like, oh, this is really good. And she gave it to Adam, who was there with her, and he ate it too.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you should never eat fruit. Just joking. Okay.
You need to eat your fruit. It's good for you.
Eat your fruits and vegetables, especially if your parents tell you to. Okay,
yes.
Continue on. Sorry.
But whenever they did that, they disobeyed God, because remember, God told them that they couldn't eat any of that fruit.
Any of that one
all the
fruit.
rest of the fruit, mm-hmm. but not that one. And so they disobeyed God. They chose to disobey God.
Yep.
And when they did that, it separated from God.
Exactly. So, like we said, our choices make or break us. So making, like, our choices make us, which would be, like, for example, it'll cause us to succeed. Mm-hmm. And then if our choices break us, it causes us to fail. So Adam and Eve chose to make a decision that would break them, which would ultimately was disobeying God. All right. So, but here's the thing. Like Scuba was saying, God put just one tree in the garden that they couldn't eat from. Okay, so we could have been like mindless robots where God was like, I'm going to give them like all the trees they can eat of, and they're going to be perfect, and it's just going to be harmony, but at the same time, that would make us kind of like mindless robots, and God didn't want us. Yeah, want us like that. Just like you have a friend, you want a friend who would choose to love you and choose to be your friend versus someone who is forced to or made to be your friend. I mean, some of y'all, like,
we have to be, we're siblings.
We're forced to be friends.
We have to be friends.
No, I'm joking, no. Anyways, so God wanted us to choose to be his friend, essentially. All right, so that is how sin entered the world. And lastly, we're going to talk about how sin separates us from God. Okay, so we have a little video to show you that. And so we're going to roll that now. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right,
roll.
Boop.